welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Welcome to Syosset Library's Turn the Page podcast. This is Jessica. I am your host today, and I have the pleasure of interviewing somebody who I've actually known for quite a while through the library world, who has published. Is this your first book, Amy?
This is my first book.
Your first book. Her first book, which is called How to Align the Stars, which is beautifully written. And it is sort of a retelling of Much Ado About Nothing from Shakespeare, but it is so much its own thing. I would love for you to introduce yourself, Amy, and tell us about How to Align the Stars and how the story came to be.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Amy Dressler. I am a former librarian. Now I work in local government records, which is somehow even less glamorous. And I moonlight as a writer. So I have always really enjoyed reading retellings of, Austen retellings are very popular. I saw the movie 10 Things I Hate About You at a pretty formative age and loved it, and had done the musical Kiss Me Kate in high school. So those Taming of the Shrew retellings were big for me in my teens and early 20s. And I wanted to write something, and I wanted to write something kind of like the things I like to read. And I read pretty widely, but I like a fun book, and I like in retellings how you can kind of puzzle through what the author did with the original story. So that's what I wanted to do with Much Ado About Nothing, which is, I think, the best of the Shakespeare comedies. It's my favorite. I am working on a project with some of the other comedies, but this is the one I wanted to start with because it's closest to my heart. And I set it in a world I'm a little bit familiar with, Eastern Washington State at a small college. And I made one of the couple's faculty and one of the couple's students, to kind of play on that age gap between them and make it a multi-generational thing. Lots of opportunity for fun comedy there and fun atmospheric situations.
So we get two different perspectives. So we get Beatrice, and then we get Heron, which is I suppose the about hero in our story.
Yeah.
Hero meaning the character hero. They're both Bee and Heron are their own heroes of the story in a way. They're both protagonists, and this story though is very much centered on Bee, who is an astronomer, and she is the older cousin of Heron, and she's kind of settling in. She has to work with this other person who she's known from college, who did something which was fairly humiliating in her past. And she, it's like she's always kind of bumping up against him and, not exactly exploring her own love life. And then Heron tells her that she is marrying her boyfriend of what Bee seems to feel is just a really short time. And then things ensue. So Bee is a plus size protagonist. She is at a point, or at least she says in the beginning, she's at a point where she's kind of not fighting that battle with her body anymore. She's focusing on the fact that she's healthy and that she's comfortable in her own skin versus the assumption that everybody has that, like if you're plus size, like obviously you're dieting, obviously you're concerned about your health. And that's kind of where she comes, where she's at in the story. And there's definitely some tension between her and Ben, and just some of the dialogue between them in the beginning. And then you have, as I mentioned, Heron is marrying Charlie, who is our Claudio adjacent character, who is, they're both young, they're both I wouldn't say impulsive. They've been dating for 3 years, but they're both students, and a lot changes, and there's a lot you learn about yourself in that time. So, do you want to kind of talk about just like the characters in general? Did B come first? Did Heron come first?
So it's interesting because I think B came first, and she is a lot more like me. I'm fat, and I use the word fat. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. It's just a descriptor, and have been my whole life. And unlike B, it took me longer to realize that there are much more important things to do than fight that battle. So, she's got other stuff going on, and she is doing great. Um, but kind of like her, I think it's really hard, even if you feel confident with yourself and you've come to terms with whatever you need to come to terms with, you're still constantly getting these external messages that tell you you should be doing something different, or you're not good enough, or you don't deserve to have the same kinds of things that other people have. Um, so that was, I mean, it's not exactly the same arc for me as it is for B, but a lot of the emotions that she goes through are similar for me. And I um also, like B, I thought being single is great. I don't need to be coupled. I'm a whole person. And I was even writing a blog called The Spinsterhood, where I would do things like have a spinster of the week. And Beatrice from the Shakespeare play was one of my weekly spinsters. And then I met my husband, and I had to stop writing that blog. So, and now I've been married a long time. And but you still kind of get those messages from outside of yourself that tell you what you should think of yourself, and they're not always what you want yourself to hear. So there is some of that in the book, and a lot of the things that B experiences from other people are kind of inspired by things that I've experienced, although nothing is exactly the same. Nobody should go looking for people from the book, but um, and then Heron is a lot different from me. Um, she and Charlie have been together for their whole college experience by the time they get engaged. And that's just really what she wants. That's what she sees as her whole path in life. In the Shakespeare story, the characters are just completely besotted with each other from the beginning. And so I took that, but then I put a little turn on it, to have her question, just as B is questioning whether she's on the right path, to have her question whether she's on the right path. And a lot of her attachment to Charlie is fueled by some trauma and some anxiety, and um she doesn't feel comfortable being on her own as a whole person because of some of the things that have happened to her. So she is working through that, and figuring out what her adulthood is going to look like, really.
Yeah, it is sort of, especially just in, I think, our society, almost like another adolescence, the point that she's at, because there is almost like a protection being in college, being in that study, world. And it's sort of, even though you are an adult, you're also not quite there 100% because everything is still in limbo. You're still taking classes, and that is definitely, I think, it's like when I was younger, people would talk about, and I'm not sure, if we're around the same age, but there was still, and I'm not sure if it's still there, that whole standard that, oh, well, you go to college and you meet somebody and you marry your college sweetheart, and that's really, what your goal is. But yeah, I think more often than not, there's a lot of just new things you're learning about yourself. And it seems like Heron, she grew up in sort of this world where, she had a lot. And there's a protection in feeling that way. But she is also a romantic, and she is a bit of a matchmaker herself. And she was very endearing, just sort of her hopefulness, sort of up against B, who was like, absolutely not, no way. And yeah, like the contrast was really just very sweet, and just that optimism that was very pure, really came through. And I liked it very much. Like I said, you write beautifully.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
No, you're
Well,
welcome.
yeah, what was fun about Heron was that she's not just a romantic for herself. It's for B too, and we get a little hint that she set her dad up with his second wife, which I thought was a
Yep,
fun
I loved
way to
that. That was
add
so
a
sweet.
little extra to the father character, and she is probably going to keep doing it.
Yeah, no, she definitely was, she's one of those people who she just wants to spread happiness, and she wants to see people she cares about happy. So I think, like, just, it is an enemies to lovers story. And as I mentioned, B and Ben had a past. Uh, so was it sort of difficult writing them together, like, seeing them kind of come together, watching those threads move, or did it feel very natural? Because they are coming both from a place of former conflict, and I guess all enemies to lovers do, but there's a lot more, I think, a lot more hurt there,
Yeah.
than I've seen in others, romances that are enemies to lovers.
Yeah, there is. And I think B is deeply hurt by something she believes Ben did when they were students. And they had been friends before that, which I think makes slights hurt a lot more. Um, and then when the book opens, they're in this state of working together. Ben doesn't really have a problem with B, but he kind of likes to get her goat. And she really just wants to avoid him. It's like, oh no, not this guy. Um, and to get to the point where I could write them together, what I did actually was I started with a short story. Um, that it was really just a writing exercise that takes place after the book to see what they would be like together after all of this happened, and what how they treat each other as a healthy couple. And what I found was that when you really know someone well enough to push their buttons and get their goat, you also really know how to take care of them. You know how to operate those buttons. So that's kind of where I started with that. And they do know each other really well, and they are well matched. They're both kind of these good people who are kind of snarky jerks sometimes. So you can imagine that they have a lot of fun together when they're together, and I wanted to show some of that towards the end of the book in the middle too. So I think they probably um give each other a lot of crap on a daily basis as a couple who are together, but in a loving way.
Yeah, definitely. It was really just a very fun read. And I'm curious, is romance like your primary genre? Is that your favorite to read?
I read all over the place, and I think I kind of see these books that I'm writing as more less romance because they don't always fit all the genre conventions for romance. So I don't want romance readers to get mad at me. Um, but also it's more about the women and their emotional journeys, which may or may not include um, a romantic partner. So future books may even have less romance. I'm working on an As You Like It remix right now. That play ends with, I think, 5 weddings. So it's interesting to take those pairings and see what else you can do with them and what's actually going on in the inner lives of the characters. It's really interesting with Shakespeare because, there's famously no stage direction. There's that one exit pursued by a bear, and I can't remember what play that is, but generally all you get is the dialogue. So you don't really get um the inner lives as much unless you have a monologue. And for the female characters, because they were played by very young men in those original performances, you don't have as much of that because the parts were written to be a little bit less challenging. So he wrote wonderful women, but there's a lot of room there to expand on what's going on behind what they're saying. And then, of course, when you bring it into the 21st century, you can give them new problems and new things to think about that weren't there. And that's not always who you're going to marry. So um, I think I always like a little fun romantic comedy element, but it's not the most important thing to me.
Definitely. So what was your road to getting published?
So I actually started writing the As You Like It project first. And I am involved with the Pacific Northwest Writers Association. I took many years ago a writing class taught by their president, and then I started going to their conferences. They do an annual contest for unpublished fiction. I entered that contest, and I really at that point didn't know if my writing was any good. I'd shown it to a few friends, but friends are always going to tell you they like it. And then I was a finalist with that As You Like It book. So I thought, oh, maybe I could keep going. Um, I queried that one a little bit, but it really wasn't there yet. It wasn't ready for publication. And then I started working on this book, that became How to Align the Stars. And I queried it around to a few agents. And then I pivoted to small presses, and this book was also a finalist at the PNWA conference when we were newly back in person. So it was right before like the awards banquet. And when you have a book that's up for recognition or something, they give you a little ribbon on your badge. So I was in the ladies' room before this banquet, and somebody asked me about my book, and I said, oh, are you excited? And I said, oh, I'm really honored, but I don't think it's going to win. It didn't, but that's okay. And my publisher, Tess Jones, who runs Egret Lake books was also in the ladies' room, and she said, "Oh, could you send that to me?" So I did. And then a few weeks later, I got a note that said, "I really loved your book and I'd like to publish it." And this is a new press that focuses on women's fiction, romance, and poetry. Um, so it's kind of cool to be involved in this new indie business too. And she has really done her homework. So it's great to I feel like I'm getting a lot more attention than an author with a big publisher might get. So
That's awesome. Well, again, I think this was a really good book. It's a really good read. How much research did you need to do about things like astronomy and sewing? Like you really got into the weeds there, I will say.
yeah, a lot. I can hardly sew on a button. I have some good friends who are amazing seamstresses, and I probably owe them a brunch because I asked them a lot of questions. I also was an English major in college. I took one astronomy class. I don't think I got a very good grade. So I was doing a lot of research on that. And then also the winemaking. I watched a lot of documentaries about running a vineyard and figuring out, could I have them make champagne? And I realized that that process is way too complicated for this newer winemaker. So there's no champagne in the book. So I just did a lot of reading about it's interesting too, weird things you find out like how to buy academic regalia, which your character is going to need if they are walking in a graduation ceremony and funny things like that that you don't always think you're going to need to research if you're writing contemporary fiction.
Yeah, thank you so much because I was reading it and I'm just like, okay, either she knows, I mean, you are a librarian, either she knows all of this stuff and has a bunch of different hobbies or her research is just on point and it really was.
Well, I'm glad I read like I know what I'm talking about because
I would
I
have never
didn't.
imagined that you can't sew a button or that you didn't do so in astronomy.
I probably shouldn't admit it, but yeah. And then, Ben is a librarian, so I do know some of the librarian stuff. And he teaches a book arts class. And I did take that class in college. I was an art history minor, and I cannot draw even a smiley face. So I had to take one studio class and I thought, oh, well, books, I'll figure that out. And then that class was really hard. So I brought in some of the projects that Heron and Charlie work on for that class are projects that I did as a senior, thinking I would have an easy class right before graduation. And then it wasn't easy at all. And that's a really fun thing too to learn about as art books and art made from books. So maybe I'll get people a little interested in that.
Thank you so much, Amy Dressler. When is How to Align the Stars available?
June 4th.
We are looking forward to it. If people would like to learn more about you and your book, do you have a website?
Yeah, I'm really easy to find. My website is just amydressler.com. And then I am on most social media as Amy Dressler Writes.
Thank you so much. We are going to close this chapter of Turn the Page.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.